Hello, thanks for joining us. From Kathryn Bigelow's look at police brutality in 1960s Detroit to a woman's quest for justice in Beauty and the Dogs. Welcome to Encore's weekly film show.
It's a war zone out there. They're destroying the city.
We're from the Kingsman tailor's shop in London. Maybe you've heard of us?
والله اللي عملتوه فيا ما تخلصوني ومثلث.
And I'm joined in the studio by film critic Emma Jones, and we're starting with Kathryn Bigelow's Detroit. It revisits a disturbing incident that took place amid 5 days of rioting in Detroit in the summer of 1967. Now, Emma, the timing of this movie is pretty apt, isn't it?
Yes, it was supposed to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the Detroit riots. It ended up being released in the US around the same time as the white supremacist protests in Charlottesville, Virginia. So you can imagine how timely this film really felt when it was first seen this summer. The Detroit riots devastated the city back in 1967. Now, what's different about Kathryn Bigelow's film is, though she starts wide and lets us see the riots, and we see why it happened, it happened because the police shut down a nightclub full of African-American revelers and treated them with brutality. So she shows all that, but then she zones in on a particular incident that occurred at the Algiers motel, where 3 black people were murdered and 3 white police officers and a black security guard went on trial for that murder the same year. There are great performances in this movie from Will Poulter, the British actor who you may have seen in The Revenant, and of course John Boyega, the Star Wars franchise star. Now, they're both fantastic in this film. John Boyega plays the security guard who ended up going on trial. And let's take a look at the film and also hear from Kathryn Bigelow for her motivation for making the film.
By Wisconsin, and on Tuesday night, we heard gunfire coming from the area near the Algiers. Police was there. There was a lot of shooting. When I went in there, 3 kids had been killed.
No. So they were killed right before you got there?
Sir.
You carry a .38, right?
It's interesting to me to use film almost journalistically. I believe that people can learn from one another, and I believe people can change. And I think this is an important story to tell. It's certainly relevant for our time.
Kathryn Bigelow has actually been criticised, especially in the US, by people who argue that an African-American director should have made this film.
Yeah, this reminds me of the controversy in the early 90s when originally an African-American director wasn't hired to make the biopic of Malcolm X. It led to a massive outcry, and then Spike Lee took over the film and did it brilliantly, of course. I think this criticism is a little unfair on Kathryn Bigelow. I mean, it's not like she was hired by a studio to make this film. She was actually approached by her regular writing partner, Mark Bourne. They worked on the script together. And then if you think of Kathryn Bigelow herself, especially what she was just saying in the clip that we just saw of her there, she was 17 in 1967, so she came of age during the Detroit riots. And then a couple of years later, she says she was protesting about the Vietnam War. She says constantly that she thinks filmmaking is kind of social responsibility in a way, and I think that's borne out in the films she makes, such as The Hurt Locker and particularly Zero Dark 30, which you may remember was a couple of years ago, and that was a look at the torture and interrogation of suspects. And at one point she was actually accused of working with the CIA. So Kathryn Bigelow's no stranger to controversy, and I suppose she keeps on sticking her head above the parapet and she keeps on getting hit.
OK, well, if you want to see my interview with John Boyega, who was in Detroit, you can watch it online at France24.com. Now we're going to move on to a film about a woman's quest for justice after being raped by some policemen. It's called Beauty and the Dogs. It played at Cannes. Did it make any waves there?
Not really, not enough, and I thought it deserved to make more. I think this is a really good film, directed by Kathryn Bigelow from Tunisia, and it stars Mariam Al-Fajani, and she's playing another Mariam, and she's a young Tunisian girl. She's out for a night out in a club, she's dancing, she's dressed like a Western woman, I suppose, in a short dress, and you see her meeting a very handsome young man. They get along very well, and they leave the club to go and get some fresh air. Now, cut to the next scene quite dramatically, and Mariam is running away, pursued by this young man. You think the worst of the guy, but actually that's not what's happened. Mariam, it's no plot spoiler to say, has been raped by some police officers in a car, she says, and the rest of the film is about her quest for justice and her humiliating and horrifying ordeal at the hands of the authorities.
And this isn't the first time the female director Kathryn Bigelow has made a point centred around women's rights in Tunisia.
Yes, she previously made a documentary drama called Le Chalet de Tunis, which was based on a true story about a man who went around on a motorbike slashing women's buttocks, and he was called the Blade for it. So clearly this is something that she's quite interested in doing. I think it's a really good watch. It's good performances by Mariam Al-Fajani, but also I think in the light of the Weinstein controversy at the moment and all the revelations that are coming out, I think it's going to be quite a film with quite a lot of resonance for Western audiences who realise that only now in the West that women are feeling able to come forward and say, you know, if they've been sexually assaulted, and to see Mariam's ordeal at the hands of the authorities and their indifference and their judgment from women as well as men, it makes a very compelling watch.
Okay, well, changing tack now, going to talk about something very different. Our next film is Kingsman 2. Now, for a time, it looked like Kingsman could be a humorous rival to James Bond, the British spy brand. What's the sequel like?
Oh, it's terrible. Sorry, in my opinion, it is terrible. I think that Matthew Vaughn, the director, is suffering from a bit of Guy Ritchie syndrome, and that's overconfident British male director who seem to think that they're a genre by themselves, that they think that they can rival Tarantino and they can put out anything, really. And the worst criticism I have about the film is it's too long, actually. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes long. Now, Peter Jackson might be worth sitting through for that long, but I'm sorry, is a Matthew Vaughn film really worth that? And perhaps the extremely big celebrity names in the film made him feel that this was worthwhile. I'll read you the list of who's in this film. It's Colin Firth, Julianne Moore, Taron Egerton, Halle Berry, Channing Tatum, Jeff Bridges and Elton John.
Quite a lot of big ones.
That's a lot of big names, but you come out with a pretty indifferent sequel, unfortunately, in the end, despite that.
OK, well, let's take a look at a clip from the film.
We're from the Kingsman tailor's shop in London. Maybe you've heard of us.
Oh, the Kingsman?
Yeah.
Huh. That's where y'all got them fine suits and them fancy spectacles y'all got on.
Exactly.
That's right.
Y'all look damn sharp. Let me see if I got it right here. You want me to believe that it's normal for a tailor to hack through an advanced biometric security system with nothing but a little bitty old watch on? I can promise you, that dog don't hunt. So why don't you go on and get down on your knees and tell me who you really work for?
So what's this one lacking that the first one had?
Heart, I think, in a word. There was a lot of love, really, for Eggsy, who is the young Cockney guy who's trained up to be a spy by Colin Firth's character Harry in the first one. He was very authentic. There was a lot of laughs, really, around the idea of this British gentleman spy and a lot of the inverse jokes about the James Bond brand. In this one, really, the plot is so preposterous that you just can't really play along with it. And also, I think, though it's written by Jane Goldman, some of the female characters are utterly one-dimensional. There's an appearance by Poppy Delevingne as a hookup Eggsy has in Glastonbury. Halle Berry's nerdy computer scientist isn't up to much. However, I will give you that Julianne Moore's evil villain, now she's quite fun. She's a real pastiche of Javier Bardem in Skyfall with her own private island of evil. And Elton John's really quite funny, sending himself up as a hysterical screaming diva.
OK, I don't think I'm going to be going to see that anytime soon. Well, just before we go, the Lumiere Film Festival festival is taking place in the French city of Lyon. The Chinese author Wong Kar-wai has been awarded the prestigious Prix Lumière.
Yeah, the Prix Lumière is the highlight of the festival Lumière, which takes place every October. And this is named after the Lumière brothers, of course, who invented cinema. Wong Kar-wai is the latest recipient of this award that includes Catherine Deneuve, Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese. And in honour of the Prix Lumière, France is going to get a re-release of a whole host of Wong Kar-wai's films from the 1990s. So unfortunately, that doesn't include my own particular favourite, In the Mood for Love, but there are some great films that are going to be available, including Ashes of Time, Fallen Angels, Happy Together.
And the only reward at Cannes that Wong Kar-wai has got is for Happy Together, wasn't it?
I know, he got it 20 years ago, really, and it is a wonderful film, though. It stars the great Tony Leung that Wong Kar-wai has been collaborating with for the last 25 years, and a wonderful performance by the late Leslie Cheung, who unfortunately died in 2003. Now, they're a couple of gay lovers. They're stranded in Argentina, and they're not having a good time together. And so, the film's half in black and white, half in colour. It's a wonderful portrayal of a relationship that doesn't work.
OK, thank you, Emma, for joining us here on France 24 to tell us what all these, some wonderful films, some a bit less wonderful. We're going to leave you with Wong Kar-wai's Happy Together. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.